Hello. Few examples of human endeavour leave such an indelible mark on the environment as the construction of railways. In this case, 135 years after its construction and approximately 110 years after it was dismantled, examples are still there in the landscape for us to follow. Here in Cullen Park was the original location of the Lancefield Junction. The junction was operated from the Kilmore station. The line that proceeded through to Heathcote went north, while the Lancefield line went to the west. Today, Cullen Drive follows the original railway formation. Whether this was intentional or just coincidence, it is unknown. This is the Kilmore to Lancefield gradient diagram. It shows the height above sea level of every point on the line. It shows the location of the stations, and at the bottom it shows the curves and their radiuses. This map shows the orientation of the line from Kilmore to Lancefield, including its 5 stations: Forbes, High Park, Springfield, Goldie and Mount William. For over 100 years of quiet and redevelopment and beautification, the evidence of the line's remains are extremely hard to see. However, nowhere else in the park, except for this small tract along here, is what appears to be ballast. I assume the line travelled from where these houses are, along here, continuing out towards Kings Lane, where it crossed the Lancefield Road. The railway line crossed the Lancefield Road here between Paynes Road and Kings Lane and headed out in this direction. It is here, at the position where the former Forbes station would have once stood, that the line's position becomes more distinct. It followed along this straight line of trees, then started to rise up on an embankment behind the red shed, past where the shearing shed is, and across the back of the hill. Another view as the line comes off the hill, still marked by the disturbed soil, then across a small embankment with trees on it, continuing past the front this side of the house. A view from the other side of the line, paralleling McDougall's Road, the railway embankment can be seen just behind the dam wall. The line crossed McDougall's Road, travelled along behind this stand of pine trees to a large flattish area where High Park station was. The line then proceeded to cross High Park Road. This is a picture of Romsey Station. As not many pictures of the stations on the line exist, this appears to be indicative of the type of station building, as many of them were relocated after the line's closure. From High Park Station, the railway line crossed over High Park Road and continued towards Mount William. The line can be seen coming from the distance from Kilmore, creating quite a distinct depression in the ground, sweeping around following this fence line to where it crossed Number 3 Creek Road. On the other side of Number 3 Creek Road, the line goes through a small cutting between this stand of trees and heads up behind the hill. After sweeping around the base of the hill in a large arc, the line again turned north, where it continued on a slight embankment and past which is now the Lancefield Road. However, 100 years ago, this road wasn't here, as this is the bypass road, and the line, before arriving into Springfield Station, then crossed what is now called the Old Lancefield Road. This driveway sits on what was the railway line as it departed Springfield Railway Station. It crossed the Kilmore Lancefield Road as it was then and proceeded northwards towards Goldie. Paralleling McGrath's Lane, the line is on a built-up embankment, some small cuttings, and still continuing in a northward direction. Another view of the railway formation as it parallels McGrath's Lane. The earthen embankment is still quite obvious. The line here passes through a small cutting before returning back to its built-up embankment. Here a small culvert is still evident after 100 years. The line continues on and through another small cutting. The largest embankment that I've seen on the line so far. Again, still parallel to McGrath's Lane, heading north. The line now curves around at the apex of its curve, crosses McGrath's Lane and heads out through a small cutting towards the station of Goldie. The line, now paralleling Lang Lane, crosses Number 3 Creek. In amongst the trees are 2 bridge pylons and what appears to be a large span leading to the embankment on the other side, indicating quite a substantial trestle bridge must have been here. There are also bridge piers on the other side too. More remnants of the bridge structure still in Number 3 Creek. This point is the apex of the curve before it turns around and heads south through the cutting towards the station of Goldie. The line now curves from its apex around through the farmland, through that farm gate, behind that large gum tree, and into a cutting paralleling Mount William Road. This large flat area with the culvert visible is most likely the location of the Goldie railway station. They certainly had some views. Once leaving Goldie, the trains start a steady upgrade along an embankment towards the highest point of the line. Here it crosses Mount William Road. After crossing Mount William Road, the railway line has become the driveway for this house, which is built on the formation. I wonder how many landowners realised the existence of the old railway line. The railway line then crossed over the Kilmore Lancefield Road here and passed into a large cutting. Once passing over the Kilmore Lancefield Road, the railway entered this cutting. In the ensuing years, it appears that some additional excavation work has been done to provide a telecommunications cable. The edges of the cutting do not look like they're 100 years old. The cutting passes through here at the top of the Great Dividing Range at an altitude in the old scale of 1,733 feet above sea level. Coming down from the top of the Great Dividing Range, the line winds its way down and across an embankment to Fagan's Lane and continues on through a small cutting towards the site of Mount William Station. Again, after 100 years, here are some sleeper bolts and a sleeper and other timber work. At the end of Loudon Close, there is a cutting that runs through a private property. And continues down towards where Mount William Station probably was. The railway line, now passing through a considerable flat area which was potentially the Mount William Station, crosses the West Goldie Road here at Patterson's Track and continues on towards Lancefield. After leaving the West Goldie Road, the railway line came across the floodplains here on a raised embankment with a number of small trestle bridges. The remnants of one is just here at Talbot Lane. The line crossed and continued on its way to Lancefield. From Talbot's Lane to Notman Lane, again the railway line is on an embankment, evidence of small trestle bridges. Crossing here and continuing on. The line curves to the left just before the shed in the distance and goes into the Lancefield Township. Again, evidence of sleepers, which is much more than were evident on the Kilmore to Heathcote line. Here is a W-class locomotive, indicative of the type of locomotive used on the line, sitting at the old Lancefield station, facing towards Melbourne. This is formerly the Lancefield railway station. It has been a nursery for many years, although currently it appears to be unoccupied. The railway line continued around the curve and entered into this area here, which was formerly the Lancefield railway yards. The line also continued on over the road to here, where there was a Lancefield town station, and continued on further to the existing Lancefield station. Well, this is about it for me now. This line was opened in 1892. It was closed in 1897. It opened again in 1900 and then for good in 1903 and was demolished, or correction, disassembled in 1917. I hope you've enjoyed this journey along the Kilmore to Lancefield rail trail. Bye.